Okay. Um, so as there weren't any questions on last week, um, and we talked about sexual disorders in the last class, uh, and there's a video for that. So we're on week 6 now, and um, I guess uh, I might have shared this in the video lecture, but I don't remember everything that I put in these lectures. Um, the video "Dying to Be Thin" is an excellent video. I would definitely watch that from the library. Um, and I think it's one of the better videos on eating disorders. And, it looks at real patients in a facility that treats eating disorders. Um, so even though um, I'm pretty sure I talk about the connection between uh, eating disorders and addiction in the lecture I've already posted. I just kind of want to give an overview of that. Um, so eating disorders, um, are found mostly in the United States. Now, when I say that, when I talk about diagnoses, like if I say ADHD, 90% of all diagnoses in the world are in the United States. That's usually because the United States overdiagnoses them, but not so with eating disorders. These are legitimate eating disorders that are diagnosed. Um, so there's another reason why the United States has the highest number of diagnoses for eating disorders. Um, there's a lot of debate on the causes of eating disorders, but um, I kind of want to help you think about it in a bigger picture. It includes more than um, kind of the media, uh, and the media is part of this, but it's just one part. So, if we look at people in the media that are popular, they create trends, and people want that certain body type, whatever the body type is, to be popular themselves, to not only be popular, but at a deeper level, to be accepted. And so, if we look at this at a deeper psychological level, there is a reason why people follow media trends or fashion trends or whatever it might be. And it's that same reason that uh, people have the idea that of perfectionism, of fear of failure, of having to meet um, conditions in order to be loved and accepted. At some point in people's lives, we usually get a message that no, we're not loved unconditionally for who we actually are. We have to meet other people's expectations and conditions in order to be loved and accepted. So love becomes conditional instead of unconditional. So with that in mind, it really depends on the environment that the individual is living in, what direction those conditions take. So, for instance, I've known people where sports are such a big deal in the household. And it could be any sport, could be tennis, could be football, could be basketball, could be any sport. But it's usually a sport that a parent is really into. And the child soon learns that, hey, if I want dad's acceptance and love, I just need to be good at this sport, whatever it is. Dad loves the sport. Dad will love me if I'm good at that sport. And it gets reinforced, dramatically. Oh, great job. Dad's so happy. Um, it could be, uh, it doesn't have to be a dad, could be mom, could be, whoever. It could be a peer group of friends. Um, we see different cliques in the school cafeteria, and everyone kind of has a theme. Even the rebels all look alike. So, they dress with the leather jackets or whatever. So, there's all different types of themes for cultural groupings, whatever it might be. And, in order to be accepted in a group, you kind of have to follow whatever norm it is. It could be, I'm just thinking of other examples other than sports. It could be something like hunting. It uh, could be wearing certain types of brands or clothing. Um, it could be looking a certain way, which ties into media, so um, I need to look a certain way in order to be considered attractive, in order to be loved and accepted, or to get a partner, or whatever we're searching for, just to be loved and accepted. And so we begin to change in order to meet other people's expectations. Um, Somebody might have never liked a certain sport. Somebody might not like to hunt. Somebody might not want to dress a certain way or act a certain way or like certain music or get good grades. That's a big one. Um, so, uh, and of course, the list is endless, you know. Um, but we begin to change who we are in order to meet other people's conditions so that they'll be happy with us, so that they'll accept us and love us. And eventually we change so much, we're no longer our genuine selves. Fritz Perls talks about this in Gestalt therapy with the layers of the personality. And he believes that people cannot live fully and genuinely if they go through these changes to meet other people's expectations. And so he has the layers of the personality, and as we peel, it's like an onion. The outside of the onion is dead and brown and brittle, and that's our phony self. And he likes the onion because that outer layer is dead and dried and brittle, and it's not living. And he thinks if we're being phony, if we're not living as our genuine true selves, why bother? Um, because we're living inauthentically. We're living for somebody else. We're not living our lives. And so the first step in peeling away the layers of that onion is helping the client to realize that, you know, they're not living genuinely, that, they've changed in so many ways that that's that phony or false layer of their personality. The second layer is fear. Uh, he would call it the phobic layer, but that means fear. And what are we afraid of? We're afraid of rejection by others. And we're afraid of not being loved, of not being accepted, of being rejected. And everybody's experienced some form of rejection in their lives at some point, and it's not a good feeling. So we want to avoid that emotional hardship, that struggle, those feelings of sadness and loneliness, and I'm not good enough. Not good enough for what? To be loved and accepted. And so, the next thing is to help the client realize that they changed because of that fear that is deep within us, that we feared rejection. And so we changed so that others would accept us, not for who we are, but for who they want us to be. And so what happens in this stage is many times, not only do we change for others, but we integrate those conditions into even self-acceptance. And we no longer accept ourselves unless we meet our own conditions. Oh, I've got to get straight A's. I've got to look a certain way. I've got to, whatever it is, you know, then we begin to internalize all those conditions so that, you know, we can accept ourselves. The problem with all this is that, like I said, at some point, we realized that people are going to reject us for many different reasons. And we want to avoid rejection. We have a fear of rejection. And so the third layer, it kind of connects to uh, that place where we got stuck uh, in becoming who we truly are. And we no longer developed as genuine people because we started trying to please somebody else. And in many times, that impasse, or that place we got stuck, is directly related to a time we felt rejected by somebody we loved. And it might have been subtle, you know, they might not have even realized they were doing it. But, you know, maybe I liked working on computers and programming, but a parent didn't give me the time of day. They're like, that's nice. But if I played a sport, they were at every game cheering me on. And so it's subtle nuances in how people react to us. And we really follow the most positive reactions because we want to feel that love and acceptance. And so at some point, our genuine development gets stuck, and we're stuck at what Pearls would call an impasse. And so, you know, as we move through this realization that of all the reasons behind our personal changes and our fears and just a desire to be loved and accepted for who we are instead of meeting people's conditions. Once we realize all these, we become aware of, all this unfinished business. Then, you know, we begin to change internally and uh, you know, we begin to say to ourselves, I do deserve to be loved and accepted for who I am. And from now on, I'm going to live as my real self. I might not know who I truly am because I've been living kind of a false identity for so many years, but I'm going to figure it out. And we kind of get excited to do that. And we decide, I'm going to throw away all this stuff. I'm going to quit whatever it is, and I'm going to pursue the things I truly enjoy and find meaningful in my life. And then we move to the external, the explosive part, and that's when we truly do begin to live as our true selves, even if it means that others won't accept us in the same way, because it really won't matter to us. I would rather wait and find somebody who does accept me for my true self rather than pursue somebody where I have to meet their conditions of what is worthy of love. So that kind of takes us through this whole process of why we change. And the media gives us so many examples of who we should be. How thin should we be? How muscular should we be? What should I wear? How should I dance? I mean, just TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, you know, it's just filled with people who try to be the person that culture would accept, fitting into the mold that current media, you know, kind of publicizes. And that mold changes. What's popular changes. But for wherever we are right now, that's what matters. And you can even see uh, how body types have changed uh, over the last 10 years and what's important to our culture and what's not, and how people work out or diet or get plastic surgery or what they wear uh, just to fit into what's popular now. And people are born with different body types. We can't force our bodies into somebody else's body type, and yet we really try. Um, let's see. I think everybody experiences this to some degree. Um, and we have to go through a process of self-discovery to figure out what is meaningful to us and who we truly are, and to be comfortable with who we are, to accept ourselves, and to really seek for relationships where others accept us unconditionally, whether it's friends or significant others or, anybody we want to keep in our lives emotionally. And so, of course, the result is people going to extremes to fit in, to meet others' expectations, to look like people in the videos on TikTok or whatever it might be. Um, the and that may lead to eating disorders. The fastest growing population for eating disorders is young males. Um, the let's see. Um, so let's talk about why I believe there's a connection with kind of addictive personalities, and it's not even a current term, it's an old term, but addiction in general and eating disorders or cutting. So a long time ago, I tried to, uh, well, I was working, I was a new, just graduated from my master's degree. I was working at an agency and I was referred a client who had an eating disorder. And I was very nervous because I knew that eating disorders could be life-threatening, and I didn't want to cause any harm or miss anything. And just because I had a master's degree, I was no expert in treating eating disorders. Um, and so I went to my supervisor, told her this. She was a great supervisor. She always gave me choices. I could refer, or, she would meet with me every week and train me in, counseling somebody with an eating disorder. And we would also monitor that individual to make sure they were safe and not becoming more unhealthy uh, to a dangerous degree. Um, and she would the my supervisor, she said, just to be safe, we'll have the client, see a family physician and weigh in and everything else and get health checkups, every so often, just to play it safe. So I felt comfortable with that. Um, and so as I began treating clients with eating disorders, um, the trend was to only look at, you know, somebody trying to look like people in the media or magazines or Barbie or whatever. Um, but I saw it was so much more, I saw that there was this perfectionism and need to be accepted and fear of rejection. And, it was more than just the media. Um, and so let's say somebody feels rejected and they want to be accepted, and they see everybody who is loved in the media and they're popular and they look a certain way. Well, maybe they'll start dieting or go on a certain diet, Um, and they could either, and we're talking about anorexia first, um, they could either eat less or they could exercise more or a combination of the two. Could also take diuretics, um, or it could lead to bulimia, you know, and they could regurgitate the food. So the what normally happens is they begin this diet, and after the first week, they look a little different, and they go into school or work, and everybody's like, "Oh, hey, you're looking great. What are you doing different?" So this desire to be accepted and the actions they're taking to look differently are immediately reinforced by other people. And so, they're like, hey, that made them feel better emotionally. The other thing is that when they were rejected, they felt as if they had no control over that situation and they didn't want to feel that emotional pain again. And they wanted control. And the one thing that we can control to some degree is our physical body. We can't control everything. We can't, look like somebody else exactly. but we can control certain things. We can control diet and exercise and what we wear and things like that. And so as people continue to diet and exercise and, take all kinds of stimulants or whatever it might be, um, and they continue to change the way they look, they feel more in control of being accepted. The more I do this, the more compliments I get, the more people seem to pay attention to me. And, you know, that gives them an emotional boost. It also creates all kinds of brain chemicals when this reinforcement happens, you know. And it actually, produces serotonin, dopamine, all kinds of things. Um, and so they like this feeling of being in control so that they'll never have to be hurt again emotionally. They'll never have to be rejected. And of course, that's an irrational thought, you know. So, um, so they continue with this. Um, so this kind of control and exercise and diet and everything else usually goes too far, because they're getting such an emotional reinforcement and a payoff for these actions. So before we talk about cutting, um, well, what do we do about this? So it's a very difficult uh, disorder to treat, um, because they've dealt with this so long that they become somewhat body dysmorphic. They have you know, a different concept of what looks good. And so, you know, I might have a person draw themselves on a big piece of paper, a life-size piece of paper, and then I have them stand in front of it, the outline, and I trace around their outline, and it's usually much smaller than their concept of self. And they can literally see the difference between their physical outline and the one they drew from their imagination. So the problem is they no longer see themselves in the same way. And it's really led by kind of this irrational thought process. Um, and so, honestly, the very first thing is helping them to understand that they are a bit irrational when it comes to their own physical perception. But most importantly, they need to believe that they deserve to be loved and accepted for who they truly are physically, um, and emotionally. And then they have to begin to accept who they are in a healthy physical body, not an unhealthy one. So that is a long road, of self-acceptance. Uh, the A lot of times it begins with family, you know, believing that they are truly accepted by family for who they are without meeting anybody's conditions. And you can try to reverse that through um, positive reactions and emotional reward, a payoff for going backwards. You know, I wouldn't even call it backwards. It's really becoming more healthy, having a healthy diet, having a healthy exercise routine, having a healthy body mass index. Um, and and everybody basically having a positive reaction towards that. But because this has been going on so long and it becomes so ingrained, it's much harder to become healthy than it was to become unhealthy. All right, so before we move on to cutting, I just want to hear anybody's reactions or things they want to share. Maybe you've had a client. Um, maybe you have some other things that I didn't mention that might help in therapy with eating disorders. What would you like to question or contribute? Nothing. This is usually a big discussion. Yeah, go ahead, Fritz.
What about the people who, how do I read this? Like they'll use food as a sort of a defense mechanism of sorts. Like common example, a young lady is sexually assaulted, and then what she'll do is to sort of make herself become what she perceives as unattractive so that it doesn't happen again. She'll become like addicted to eating to sort of get herself big. Like, what about that?
Yeah, that's kind of like the same thing, only opposite. You know, it's a response to trauma. Yeah, definitely. Good example. What else?
When I was doing my internship at Western Psych a couple years ago, I remember when I was on the eating disorder unit, and I was like the same way as you, Grafton. Like I was like, okay, how am I going to approach this? It was like one of my first units I've ever been on. And it was recreational therapy was the internship that I was doing it for. So we did a lot of like activities and stuff. But our main thing was like self-care. We had like a big self-care cart we would take around. It had like nail polish, different like bracelets you could make. And I think just promoting that of like, hey, there's stuff that you can do, for like self-care that's a healthy way of showing it, was really, really helpful. And I did enjoy it. Like I liked working with individuals with eating disorders. It was um different perspective and it was nice.
Yeah, good example. Thanks.
I'll add something too.
Good.
One of my cousins who was adopted, he grew up in a home where he was neglected a lot. And so he developed an eating disorder because it was like survival. So anytime he had food in front of him, he still does this to this day, but he eats like absurd amounts because he, has that mindset where he doesn't know when he's going to get food next, even though he is going to now. But yeah, it's developed an eating disorder, so it was really hard whenever he was a toddler because he would just eat nonstop and ask for snacks nonstop, and he's slowly growing out of it, but it was just like an interesting side of eating disorders to see.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had a couple clients like that, and not only would they eat until they couldn't eat anymore, but they would also hoard food and hide it, like under their mattress, under their beds, anywhere they could.
He
Um,
did the same thing. He would hide food underneath his bed as well.
mhm. Yeah, that's a good example too. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about cutting. So, cutting um, is very similar, but let's let's talk a little bit about what happens. So, usually someone is going through some type of emotional struggle, and maybe they experience some type of trauma. Maybe, there's so much anxiety or dysfunction in the house, in the home. Maybe they're not happy with who they are. Uh, maybe they don't know who they are. Maybe they've been rejected. Whatever the reason is, they're experiencing a lot of emotional pain. And they don't know how to deal with this emotional pain. Nothing seems to help. And then nowadays, a lot of people will tell somebody else, that they cut and it helps them. But it used to be that people would find out by accident, they would accidentally cut themselves. And, at first it would really hurt, but then they realized a number of things. So what happens is somebody cuts themselves and their minds are no longer on their anxiety or depression. So if depression is thinking about the past and anxiety is focused on the future, they're not in the present. If somebody injures themselves, their minds are immediately dragged into the present because our physical body takes control of our cognitive brain because, hey, we got to pay attention to this. We're being hurt physically. So automatically, we are brought into the present. And we're no longer thinking about depressive thoughts from the past or anxious thoughts about the future. We're also no longer thinking about past trauma. We're thinking about present pain. And the second thing that happens that our brain does is it creates endorphins, and it creates all kinds of brain chemicals that help us to deal with the pain, the physical pain. But at the same time, all of those endorphins and other brain chemicals change our mood slightly. And then we realize, oh, it wasn't so bad. I feel better now. I got a Band-Aid on it and, some Neosporin and, you know. But then later, people make the connection that, wow, I'm no longer anxious, or I'm no longer depressed, or I'm no longer ruminating or dwelling on these negative thoughts or experiences. And so they find emotional relief from that physical pain. So when we think about it, the closest I can come to this experience is when I was like 13 or 14, I ran a marathon because I was on a cross country team, and I'm like, man, once I get this letter and letter jacket, I'm never doing this again in my life. Uh, and so I knew I would never be in that good of running shape again. And so I'm like, I'm going to run a marathon now, just to say I did it. And around mile 15 to 20, I was like, I don't know if I can finish this marathon. Because when you train for a marathon, it's usually 10 miles at a time, probably twice a day. But it's not like 26 miles. You don't train for a marathon by running a marathon. So, you know, those 5 miles, like I was dragging. I did not think I'd be able to finish the last few miles. But then all of a sudden, I like woke up and I never felt better in my life. I felt better at mile 20 than I did when I was starting the race. And that's what they call a runner's high. You know, your body and brain think that once you reach a certain point running, something must be chasing you and you're running for your life. So, you know, uh, if back in the time of the Stone Age, you know, saber-toothed tiger is chasing you and you're about ready to stop because you can't go any further, this safety fight or flight mechanism just kicks all these endorphins and other chemicals into your brain and your body, and it is a runner's high. And the last 6 miles were fantastic. Um, so, you know, I've known people who are addicted to running marathons, and I'm pretty sure that's why. Um, so that's the only time I've ever experienced that type of cognitive chemical uh, boost. But I could certainly understand, you know, how that could be addictive, especially when it relieves emotional pain and trauma. Um, so when we think about the addiction cycle, um, we could just talk about cigarettes. All right. So nicotine, one of the hardest things to quit. And one of the reasons is that not only do we become physically and mentally dependent on nicotine, but one of nicotine's side effects is that it reduces anxiety. That's why a lot of people in the military smoke, because it relieves anxiety. And, you know, so there's a cycle in smoking cigarettes that the chemicals, the nicotine, this is also why people use Wellbutrin when they're trying to quit nicotine, because it satiates or reduces a lot of the nicotine cravings. So functions in a very similar way. So a lot of people will find the well, I don't even know if Wellbutrin, it's kind of a weird SSRI. It's like there's a technical name for it, but it's not quite an SSRI. So anyway, it does help with smoking, uh, quitting smoking. So uh, the so there's always an addiction cycle. So when our bodies begin to process the nicotine and it's no longer affecting our brains, we begin to think about smoking again. And, you know, first thing that might happen is something stressful happens. And we're like, oh, so stressful. I have some anxiety. Wow, I wish I could smoke a cigarette. That would help lessen my anxiety. And so the first thing that happens is we're triggered in some way, and our response is some proven method that we've used before to reduce our anxiety. And so the thought is placed in our mind. The next thing we do is we begin imagining the ritual process. We don't just imagine smoking a cigarette. We imagine, oh, I always go down to the corner store. Everybody knows me there. Um, you know, I'll buy a pack of my favorite cigarettes, maybe Marlboro lights or something. And Americans, they seem, you know, they hit the pack of cigarette on the palm of their hand called packing the cigarettes, and it makes the tobacco more dense. Europeans are smarter. Uh, they take out a cigarette and they loosen the tobacco. So when you loosen the tobacco, it actually burns hotter and you get a higher concentration of nicotine. It also provides space for the smoke, which is, the transport mechanism of the nicotine to enter your lungs and then go into your bloodstream and then go into your brain. So, either way, it becomes part of the ritual, packing it, making it more dense, or loosening it, part of the ritual. Then put the cigarette in your mouth, and everybody carries zips, but the classic thing is like the sound of a Zippo lighter, cling, and then the swoosh of the flame. And even the sound of a Zippo lighter opening could be a trigger for a cigarette addiction, nicotine addiction. So imagining the ritual, if we begin to imagine the ritual, it's almost impossible not to follow through with the action. It's almost a done deal. So once we imagine the ritualistic process, we want to fulfill that payoff. And it's the same thing with cutting. Imagine that somebody is experiencing anxiety or remembering trauma or whatever it might be. Something makes them remember it, or something creates anxiety, and they begin to move up that cycle. And the next thing is, they usually have something like maybe a box and it has memorabilia in it. And one of the things in that is a razor blade, and it's under their bed and they know exactly where it is. It might be decorated. And they imagine reaching under the bed, opening the box, seeing all the memories, pulling out the razor blade, and already the brain is anticipating that chemical payoff and relief. And once again, they follow through with it. They fulfill the ritual process. And then we get the chemical payoff in our brain, and our anxiety is lessened, and we're back at the bottom again until the cycle begins all over. So that's why I believe that cutting is connected with addiction, even though there's no real chemical being used. It does promote the creation of our own brain chemicals and physical reactions to it. All right, thoughts on that? Reactions? Agree, disagree?
Just that it reminds me of sort of similar, the ritual that people go through who have anger management issues. That, like, let's say you're driving and somebody cuts you off and you signal to them, like, okay, we're going to go over there and fight because I'm angry. And, then they go through the whole thing of pulling over together. Like, this is often two people who are feeding each other's addiction. And they go, okay, we're going to go through the ritual together. We're both going to get out and decide to hurt each other. And then, afterwards, they just get in their car, so they drive back as if nothing happened. And it kind of is interesting that, I wonder how much of it is not just the hurting somebody component, but the pain component that they're also receiving.
The
I know a
adrenaline?
lot of guys, the adrenaline, a lot of the guys who are in there will do things like let the person hit them first, which, on the one hand looks like bravado, but on the other, a lot of people say they need to feel a little bit of pain first before they can actually get into it. Um, so it just kind of reminds me of that, where it's like, for some people, maybe cutting was too private, too passive, but in a sense, this is sort of like you're cutting yourself in another person's fist, so to speak. Um, and it avoids a lot of the anxieties of whatever was happening while you're driving and all that. It's very consuming.
Good example. And on a deeper level, there's something beneath that anger that is resulting in anger in the cycle. There's some unfinished emotional business that created that cycle of anger.
Yeah, I'm usually a fan of the saying that like anger is fear in disguise. Um, I don't say that
Fear
it is its
turned
own
into
emotion, but
yeah. Yeah. What else? All right, so those are the two big things I kind of wanted to recap. There may be some similarities between what I just shared in class and the lecture you're going to see recorded, but that's okay. Yeah, make sure you watch the videos and the recordings and but hey, the most important thing, please turn that paper in by Thursday. I am not allowed to give incompletes, so you must turn that paper in on time.
Is that Thursday at midnight or Thursday at 7?
We're going to share it in class.
Okay.
So you're going to talk about your paper in class. So just like your discussion boards, turn the paper in. It's, before class so you can share it in class next time we meet next Thursday. All right. Any questions? All right. We'll see you later.
bye. Have a good one. Thank you.
All right, Fritz. Patrick's still here, but we emailed and it sounds like you're on top of it. You got a lot to do in a week, but so I'm okay with it. Just catch up and you'll be good.
My mic wasn't working, but yeah, I'll be able to do that. I'll be able to do it. Just the past month, I got promoted at both jobs, so a lot of paperwork, a lot of time being eaten up. But yeah, I'll be able to get everything in by the end of the first half of the summertime.
All right, and don't stay up like 24 hours, like 3 days in a row to do it.
I don't do that anymore. It's just
All
2 days,
right, good.
but
All
but
right, man. Good luck.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.